My father introduced me, and now it's my son's turn. Woodworking is a passion we'll share forever. Woodcraft understands that. Their people know the right tool for the job, and they make sure we understand how to use it. Their help? It means a lot. Woodcraft knows how we feel because they feel the same way. You know, I enjoy sharing my secrets, and now Jake's teaching me some things too. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Tight Bond Wood Glues, the pro's advantage.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of I Can Do That. I'm your host Chad Stanton, and I've decided to scrap today's project. Why? Well, I think it's going to be a beautiful day, and I've decided I want to eat lunch outside. So I've decided to make a picnic table. I ran to the lumber store, did a quick SketchUp, and now I'm back to start doing a build. So a couple of things to point out when you're getting lumber. When you're selecting your pieces, you want to look for certain things. For example, I want to make sure that the boards are straight. There's a couple of issues you can have. It can be bowed, it can be cupped, it can be crooked, and it can be twisted. So take your time selecting the pieces at the store. Also, most people, if they're going to build something outdoors, they would get treated. But I don't like the treated lumber because it's usually really wet, and when it dries, it'll check and crack and it will really twist and warp. So I've decided to go with just regular lumber, but I'm going to treat it with an exterior deck stain. All right, well, I've got some unloading to do, and then we'll figure out how to put this thing together. All right, so early this morning, I decided to do a quick drawing on SketchUp here. And this is kind of the concept that I want for the picnic table, but I pretty much can guarantee you once I start building this, I'm going to make changes and it won't look the same. So don't count on seeing this for the free plans. All right, so I printed up some drawings from my SketchUp design, and remember I said that it's probably going to change in the build? I already have my first change. What I thought I was doing was I thought I had some 1/4-inch spacing between the boards. And I figured some 1/4-inch plywood would be just that. It's not. This is 3/16. Also, too, I figured that the 2x6s that I bought were actually going to be 5.5 inches. Again, they're a little bit shy. So my plans were supposed to be 17 inches, and I'm closer to 16 5/8. Now, what I'm doing here is I need to figure out the outer perimeter pieces. And as you notice from the drawings, that these 3 center boards are what gives me the measurement for the angles. So I have a piece here I've already done. Okay, so as I'm building this, the outer perimeter, this angle is actually 45 degrees, but I'm cutting it in half. I'm mitering it, so I have to divide that in half, so it's 22.5 degrees. That's what I would set on the miter saw. Now, to measure this, I said 16 5/8 was my length that I wanted. And when I put the tape measure on, well, I have to be careful where I position this tape measure because you'll notice that I have a gap here. I'm not at the corner. Yeah, I could bring it down here and try and measure over, but it's going to have the tendency to slip off. So what I like to do is I'll move it up to the 1-inch mark, and then I have to add that 1 inch to my overall length, which would be 17 5/8. Of course, an easier thing is to do, once you make your first cut, you can just use it as a template. So I've got a bunch of these to cut out on the miter saw, and then we'll come back and see what the next step is. So I've cut the pieces for the outer frame, and I've been joining them together with pocket screws. Now, this was something I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that we had pocket screws that were 2.5 inches in length and able to be for exterior use. So it's something new we're trying. And I'm also using some type 3 glue. This is good for all types of weather. Okay, now remember I said you can't always trust the plans? Here's another example why. So the math works out perfectly in the drawing, but we're dealing with reality. So my saw set at 22.5 degrees, all these should be perfect. Well, take a look what happened. So this piece and all the other pieces measure out to about 21.125. Here, I measured out at like 19.25. So why is that? Well, if that is off just a fraction of a degree, that mistake is compounded not 8 times, but 16 times going all the way around. Now, you're probably thinking the obvious fix would just be cut and put in a shorter piece. Yeah, I could do that. But I really want this to look as much as symmetrical as possible, so I have another idea, and I'm going to try it out and see if it works. Okay, so here's what I'm going to try to do to fix our problem. Now I know I want this to be the same length both directions, which is 50.5. So I cut the 2 middle boards and put it in there and put this clamp holding it in place. Now what I've done is I've took some of our 2x6 and I've just clamped it to the rest of the frame. With a pencil, I'm drawing what our angle will be. Now we know this angle is not 22.5, it just didn't fit. So what is that angle? Well, you could go with one of these tools here. It has different angle settings on it, and I could line that up with what I got, and it should be pretty close. But I have the same issue with that I do with my saw. I have to trust that that number is exact. And does that number match up with the numbers on my saw? Probably not. So a better way to do it is with a bevel. What I'll do is I'll take this piece out. And I'll set the bevel to what that pencil line is. Now I'll take the bevel over to the miter saw. I'll place the bevel against the fence, and then I'm going to move the table and try and line up this kerf edge with the angle on the bevel. Okay, that looks pretty good. I locked it down. Take my piece. Now, I still can't trust that I have this turned exactly to the line. So I'm going to cut on the waist side, a little proud of it. Okay, if you look real close, you'll see that it's wider here than it is up there. Not by much, but it does need to be moved over a little. So I'm going to keep bumping this over, making some cuts and checking to see if it's parallel. Once I got it parallel, I can cut right on that line. And I did that with the opposite side here. And you can see this piece fits really nice. Okay, so I'm going to finish sneaking up on this line and fitting it, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I got the 3 middle boards in, which were pretty simple. I just took my measurement, made some straight cuts, and then pocket screwed it in. But now I want to test out the spacing for these here. Now on my drawing, it said it was going to be 2 boards, but I can't trust anything right now. So I still have the same spacing between this, which was the 3/16, and I've got some scrap pieces that I cut at 45. So I'll put these in, again with the spacing. Oh man, look at that. Perfect. I couldn't have planned that better. But I'm sure I'm not going to get so lucky on the other side. Let me test it. Well, really not bad, just a little bit of shaving, and I can do that with the plane. So I'm going to go ahead, and what I'll do is I need my measurements. So with the pencil, I'll mark here, and mark there. And with my tape measure, I can measure that and cut it at the 45. But just like before, I'm going to cut it proud of the line, slowly sneak up on it, so I get nice tight fits here. And then pocket screw it, and this top is done. And we'll move on to probably the legs. Okay, I got the last piece in, and I noticed something doing this. I forgot that these corners here weren't at the 22.5 degrees. They were closer to actually like 21 3/4 degrees. Doesn't sound like much, but then that made this where it wasn't a true 45. So on that end, I got a little bit of a gap. On this end, I was able to scoot it closer to 46 degrees, and it's a pretty good fit. At any rate, it's just a picnic table, right? Okay, let me move this aside, and I'll start working on the legs. Okay, so I'm working on the legs, and so far I've decided I want the legs at 43 inches long. So I've already made my cut at 45 degrees, and from that point, I'm going to measure down to 43. Now at this point, it's kind of tempting to put your 45 square on there and make a mark, but that's going the wrong direction. I actually want them going the same way. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to transfer this line back here, and now I can make my 45-degree line. The reason I made those 3 little passes, well, this wood feels kind of damp. And if I go straight down on it, there's a chance that that wood would pinch the blade and cause some kickback. Okay, now I want to find the middle of this. Now we know our measurement is 43 inches, so half of that is going to be 21.5. So I put my square on here right up to the points. And I can either measure down this way, make sure I got my 43, go to 21.5, or even go to the points and measure down. But just to make sure I got it right, I'm going to check it from both directions. And I'm off a hair. Okay. And I want to transfer this to both sides. All right, now I need to find the middle of the board. So these are 5.5. So I need to be 2 3/4. Oops, 2 3/4. Okay, now I'm going to drill a small pilot hole through this. And I'm going to go about halfway, stop, and then flip it over and drill the other way. This makes sure that I'm drilling through exactly straight, not off to an angle. Okay, now I'm going to put the screw through, a pocket screw. And I want to line it up with that mark on the other board. Okay. So now these will act like scissors. And I want to do two things. I snug this up again. I want to check to see if I have this at 45. Okay, that looks pretty good. But I'm going to stand it up and see how it touches on the bench top. And it looks like this toe is a little high, so I'm just going to tap it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to run 2 more pocket screws in here just to hold it in place, but this isn't what's going to secure these legs together. Okay, we're also going to have a stretcher that's going across from the 2 pairs of legs. And we're going to have a lag screw that goes through both legs and into the stretcher. So I now need to find out the placement for where that stretcher will be. So I'll take my square, and this edge and this edge I want to transfer up to here. So basically, I'm looking for the middle of these boards. Now I can connect those. That's right in the middle. Now, our stretcher is going to be another 2x6, so it's really 1.5 inches wide. So I need to measure 3/4 of an inch on both sides. This will be the stretcher, and I'm going to place that between there. And I'm just going to kind of like eyeball the distance on this. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now I'm going to pre-drill a hole through this, and then I'll have to pre-drill into the stretcher and run the lag screws in and tighten them up. So let me do that, and I'll show you me putting it together after I make another set of legs. All right, I've been busy putting this all together, and let me explain what I did. Those pocket screws, well, I backed them out one by one and did a countersink of 3/8 for it. I also, too, drilled clearance holes through the legs, but then changed to a smaller drill bit and made a pilot hole into the stretcher. I've got some 5-inch lag screws and some washers on it, and I'm just tightening it up now. Okay, now let me bring the top back in and we'll figure out how we're going to attach this to it. Okay, so I got the top back in, the legs on it, and we had some discussion on how we're going to attach the legs to the top. And here's what we came up with. We decided to have the legs going perpendicular to the top here. We think it's going to give us more support. And as far as attaching them, well, we're going to be using some of this 2x2 blocking. And we're going to use some lag screws that will go through the block and screw to the top of the table. And then we're going to use some carriage bolts to go through the blocking and attach it to the legs. Now, when I mark these out, I want to make sure that for the lag screw here, I'm going to be going into some good meat on the tabletop. And also for the carriage bolts going through, I want to make sure that they're not at the edge of the leg. But I have to be careful that I don't have the two bolts intersecting each other. Okay, so let me do some drilling and marking and attaching this, and we'll come back and see what it looks like. Okay, I've been busy putting all these bolts in, and I probably should have had some longer hardware. So to make up for it being a little bit short, I had to countersink this. Now I'm just about done, but because I know this is going to be sitting outside and we're going to have some bad weather at some point, well, this is end grain, and it's going to really want to soak up a lot of water, and that moisture inside it will ruin these legs. So a nice tip is, using that same Titebond number 3 exterior glue, I'm just going to put a thin coat on all the feet of these legs, and once it dries, that's going to help prevent any water from wicking up in it. Once I get this done, then I'm going to start working on the seat. Okay, so I have the picnic table off to the side drying, and I'm going to start making the benches. Now, usually a lot of picnic tables have the benches attached to them, but we decided to have ours separate. That way it's easier to move when you're cutting the grass or just storing it away for the winter. So the seat for the bench is going to be made up of a couple of 2x8s, and we've decided we want a nice little curve on our bench. So I've got a template that I'm making up here. Now, it's 2.5 inches from the edge to the middle of the arc, and same for the opposite end. To make the arc, I use the arc drawing jig. And essentially what it is a stick with a string, and I can move the string in different placements and it'll bow the piece of wood. Okay, now I'm just going to cut this out with the jigsaw, and then I'll show you how I'm going to put it actually on the seat boards, because you'll notice that my template is actually smaller than the size of the seat. I'll show you that next. Okay, I've got my template cut out and smoothed, and now I want to transfer that onto the boards for the seat. But before I do that, inspect the boards. You'll notice that the two edges here, well, they don't look all that great. So I'm going to make sure that when I place the template on here, and I'll keep the edge of the template to the edge of the board, and the front of the template right to the edge of the seat board. And you'll notice that this will now become the area that will get cut off. So I eliminated that ugly edge. However, this one is still there. So I have to make sure that I remember to flip this board over to the bottom. That way we won't see it. And same thing on this board. Although this board looks a lot better, I do have a little here on this edge I don't like. So once again, I keep this flush, put the points to the corner, and I trace this out. Not only will I eliminate that, but I'll get rid of this knot too. Okay, let me use the jigsaw again, cut this out, smooth the edges, and then we'll move on to making the legs for it. Okay, so I've been working on the legs, and once again, we changed the design. We liked the look of the X on the table, so we're going to incorporate that onto the little bench. But we had a problem. When we cut the legs at 45 degrees, the legs were sticking way out here, way past the seat, which would be a serious tripping hazard. So we worked the leg angle back and we settled on 30 degrees. Now, it's wide enough to give us stability, but doesn't stick out too far past the seat where it's going to be a problem. Now, we've decided to go with 18 inches for the height of our stool. If you want to change yours, here's what you could do. Let's say this represents the thickness of the actual seat top. At 30 degrees, cut here, I would then bring my tape measure up, and in this case we went to 18. If you wanted it shorter or taller, that's where you would draw your line, and again cut it at 30 degrees. Now putting these pieces together, and the X, well, you'll notice that the pivot point isn't in the middle. I had to move it up, and that dimension is on the correct plans at the end of this video. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and put this set of legs together the same way I did that one, and we'll be good to go. If I can figure it out. Now I'm going to work on the stretcher for it. Okay, so the stretcher was attached the same way we did it on the table. I did a countersunk hole, clearance holes through the legs, and then a pilot hole into the stretcher, and used a lag screw to tighten it all up. Now, the way I'm going to mount this to the seat is I've placed it on here and traced around each leg. Then I'm going to drill clearance holes through this, turn it over, a couple of pilot holes into the leg, and put the screws in that way. Okay, when I pre-drilled this, I wanted to go on the angle of the leg. That way I wasn't going to come down on this and possibly split it. So I used the bevel set at that, and now I'm ready to sink the screw. And the screw, well, it's a deck screw. So you can see that it actually has self-tapping point, it has threads, and then it has these reverse threads which help sink it and prevent that mushrooming. This is mostly used on composite decking, but I liked it because the head is small, and once it sinks in, it's hardly noticeable. Okay, let me bring the table in and show you what the two look like together. Okay, so the table's here and we have one bench done, and to complete the set, I'll make 3 more benches. Then I have some sanding to do on it. Now, when I cut these 2x6s, they were straight, and when it came to the edges of the other 2x6s, well, the corners are rounded over. So I took a chisel just to kind of make a little bevel to it, make it a little bit smoother. After the sanding is done, I'm going to have to seal it. And this is a stain and sealer combined together. Using this, I'm actually going to brush it on, and I'm going to even want to do the bottoms of the feet, even though I put that glue down there to help prevent any kind of wicking again up into the legs. Well, I hope you enjoyed this project, but more importantly, I hope you actually enjoyed seeing the behind the scenes of how we start a project from start to finish. As I said, we started off this morning, completely new idea. You saw the design, you saw some of the build, you saw the changes, and now you see the finished product. Tune in next time and watch another episode of I Can Do That.